Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
Hey, folks, welcome. Great to have you back here. We are back and ready to go. Another 3 hours of broadcast excellence. Rush Limbaugh, your guiding light. America's real anchorman. America's truth detector and the doctor of democracy. 800-282-2882. Folks, if you look at things the right way, if you look at things in the right perspective, and I do, if you look at things entirely differently than the daily soap opera presented by the drive-by media, there are some things happening out there that are inescapably conclusive. And those things add up to a lot of leftist things imploding. The New York Times is in some trouble. James O'Keefe with another hidden video of an editor, their front page on the website editor, proving that they're what we already have known about the New York Times. And they even admit that they were failing until Trump got elected. Now their subscriptions are up because their subscribers need a daily dose of hate for Trump. So Trump has bailed out the failing New York Times. On their own, they would be in big trouble. Hillary Clinton, this is getting embarrassing. This is getting embarrassing what this woman is saying and doing, and it's, I mean, I'm not to the point of being uncomfortable talking about it, but there's something seriously wrong here. And whatever it is, she is imploding and refusing to go away. Hollywood, for crying out loud, it's now gone way beyond Weinstein. Now these Hollywood women are coming out and talking about how all of them have been abused since they were teenagers. And it's obviously much more than just Weinstein. And there's a bombshell story that an A-list Oscar winner is somebody along the lines of Weinstein. And everybody knows who this is, but for legal reasons, they're not naming the guy. But that's caused all kinds of speculation. But even if that person's not named, it just Hollywood can't. They're having a lousy box office. It's Clooney's new movie is called Suburbicon or something, and it's an attack on middle America. It personifies Hollywood's attitude toward people that don't fit into any elite category. The NFL is imploding as well. Wait till you hear what the NFL's supposed solution to their problem is. Let me just give you a hint. The NFL believes that they can get the players to stop protesting if they join an effort to relax sentencing guidelines for drug abusers in the hood. The NFL is hoping to buy the players off with this. Now, and this news comes before the NFL meetings that are happening today and half of tomorrow. This is an effort, and it's a legislative effort. What? The NFL is joining the forces trying to reform sentencing guidelines, to reduce sentences for non-felonious drug crimes in the hood, primarily. And they are hoping that this gets the players' support, get them turned away from protesting the flag and supporting this. It's an effort to now this is the NFL. They're not doing anything about football. They're now joining a left-wing legislative effort here in order to buy the players' acquiescence to stop the protest. What this is, it's an effort to reduce mandatory minimum penalties and jail time for narcotics felons and the like, who in this legislation are referred to as non-violent drug offenders. And it has some Republican support, so the league can say that they are joining conservative thought leaders in this movement. Mike Lee and Rand Paul are two Republican senators in support of the effort. Jeff Sessions has already killed this legislation when he was in the Senate. Now he's the Attorney General. It's by no means a slam dunk. Now, from the league's standpoint, it's pretty clever. Under cover of conservative thought leaders, Rand Paul and Mike Lee. The NFL wants to join the players in fighting for reduced mandatory sentences for drug crimes. In the process, they'll get their social justice warrior credibility, and they'll give players a face-saving way to retreat on the kneeling and the protesting the flag, and everybody gets to go back to making money. So they buy the players off. So look, you guys, join us in this effort to reduce these drug sentences, which are just way, way too strict and way too punitive. And we know who's affected by these sentences. You join us in this, and we'll lead the effort on this, and you join us. We may even give you a couple of Sundays to highlight this if you'll stop kneeling during the anthem. And the letter that the NFL sent has been signed by a player from the Seattle Seahawks, Doug Baldwin, as the league has made this position official. I don't think this is the only concession they'll make to the players, but you can see where this is headed. This is headed to the league caving to the players and trying to buy them off with what they think are important social justice issues to the players in the National Football League. We'll have more detail on this. I'm just setting the table here. CBS and NBC are imploding. And ESPN to boot. ESPN's ratings last night, I don't want to say all-time low, but I mean, you have to go back many years to find ratings as poor as they were last night. I think they had a 6 rating. And normally Monday Night Football's in double digits. Now, it didn't help that one of the teams is the Indianapolis Colts, about whom literally nobody cares anymore outside of Indianapolis, because Peyton Manning isn't there. And Andrew Luck, the star quarterback, hasn't played since shoulder surgery 15 months ago, and there's no sign he's going to start playing soon. And there's your franchise quarterback on the bench. CBS is going to announce their quarterly numbers, and their revenue is expected to be way, way down because of revenue loss due to ratings declines for the National Football League. NBC has similar problems. The FBI, folks, we have learned that there was collusion between the FBI and the Obama administration and the Russians in 2009 and 2010 over this uranium deal. Real collusion. Much more collusion than whatever Russia was doing by spending $100,000 buying ads on Facebook. This is a blockbuster story, and it comes from our old buddy John Solomon. Used to be at Circa, used to be the AP, used to be the Washington Times. Now he is at thehill.com. And this really is a bombshell, except outside of thehill.com, it's being ignored, because it totally upsets every premise behind the Get Trump investigation. While they have no evidence of any collusion by Trump with Russia or vice versa, there is all kinds of evidence that the FBI has had since 2009 and 2010 and suppressed over the Clintons, Bill and Hillary, and the Canadian mogul that donated to their foundation, and the transfer of United States American uranium to Russia. And Bill Clinton personally was enriched by thousands and thousands of dollars, as was the Clinton Foundation, the Crime Family Foundation. And Obamacare is important. If you look across the American landscape, things the left holds dear are imploding, but you're not seeing it reported because the drive-bys would never report this, even if they happen to see it. Now we have a new story on tax reform today that poses a fascinating philosophical question for me. Paul Ryan, the office of Paul Ryan, has announced that if they get tax reform done this year, that what it's going to mean is essentially $4,000 a year increase the average American family. Here's the headline. Tax reform will raise wages at least $4,000 on average. Translated, that means most families on average will keep $4,000 of their own money instead of paying it in taxes. So they word it here as the same thing as getting a raise, but they haven't gotten a raise. What's happening is the government is keeping or will keep less of their money. Now, here's the philosophical question. As we survey America, and we have tax reform over here as a piece of legislation that we seriously want to get done, does the news that you and you and you and all Americans on average will see an increase of $4,000 in your disposable income every year, does that news sway you, persuade you to support the tax reform legislation? Or, on the other side, you only get this if you work. You only get this if you are working and earning money. We're taking Santa Claus. Santa Claus is not going to give you the $4,000. You have to earn it by working, and then you'll get a tax cut. So the philosophical question is, the $4,000 is a huge amount of money in one lump to a family. It's huge. This is why so many people arrange their income taxes so they get a refund every year, because they never, other than that, see such a lump sum. So what's it going to be? Work, earn a living, and keep $4,000 more of what you earn, or would you rather it come from Santa Claus and you not have to work for it? I bring it up that way because the Democrats are going to be pitching it this way. The Democrats are going to say, well, yeah, but what about the people who are unemployed in the Trump economy? And they're going to start ramming the economy and ripping the economy and focusing on the unemployed. And how the hell are they going to benefit from this? You wait. And a solid American virtue like work will once again come under assault as something that is partisan and exclusionary and typical of the Republicans, and they only care about people at work, and they don't care about people who can't find a job. So this is why I present the philosophical question in that way. There's also the drive-bys are attempting something brand new, and it started yesterday in the president's press conference with Mitch McConnell. They're trying to say that the president doesn't really care about the military because he's not calling the families of lost soldiers, and he's not writing them letters. And he said yesterday that he's doing much better. He does it all the time, and Obama never did it. And that has caused the predictable explosion among the entire press corps, which is Obama Inc. Obama must be defended Inc. So that's the latest quote-unquote scandal the drive-bys are focusing on to try to humiliate and embarrass Trump. In the meantime, I have two stories here that I want to, and they're excellent, about how great Trump is doing, but not just how great he's doing, but what it means in terms of the country at large. And one of the stories says what Trump is doing is recreating the America that Alexis de Tocqueville saw when he came here and wrote about what makes America unique, different, and great. That Trump is rebuilding America so that it is that great place that Tocqueville saw. And the story provides evidence and analysis. So, folks, once again, as I sit here right now, we are loaded. I also know that when I stop talking and look at my computer, 10 different things are going to be there that have not been known to me until now. In other words, news is being made even while I have been opening the program with another brilliant monologue. So I'll turn to the computer, and I'm going to have to start using discipline. I've got a good program. It's all prepared. It's ready to go, including your phone calls. I may just shut down the computer so I don't see anything and rely on you people in there to tell me if something really, really blockbuster happens. I'm just teasing. I don't trust you people to tell me the right thing either. You know, I am the editor. I am the filter. I know what's big and what isn't, but it all still has to be sifted through. So, we take the break. We'll come back. because it's enjoyable and parts of it are funny, I'm going to start with the implosion, if we can call it that, of Hillary Clinton. Don't go away. Okay, clarification on the $4,000 a year wage increase. I mean, that's what the headline, and it's from Paul Ryan's office. New report: tax reform will raise wages at least $4,000 on average. Now, look, there's no way that tax reform can raise your wages. Your employer raises your wages. But see, this is where I, as the mayor of Realville, get into trouble. They say something that can't possibly be true, so I try to analyze what they really mean. And then somebody says, no. Let me tell you what it really means. And this is what they're saying it really means. The pay raise, which there isn't a pay raise here, unless Congress is ordering your employer to increase your gross or your net, however they calculate it, $4,000. The pay raise is a result of reforms that help keep businesses in the United States, so that's the repatriation of foreign revenue, and bring jobs and capital back home from abroad. Oh, so Apple has a cash pile, let's round it up, $250 billion. Now, 75 to 80% of it's overseas because the American tax rate, corporate tax rate's 35%. Apple can... Why bring it back if you got to pay 35% on it when there's no comparable tax rate in any other country? So they leave it in the countries where it's earned, and I think they park it in an account in Ireland. I'm not really sure about that, but the point is tax reform is going to lower the corporate tax rate, and there's going to be a special repatriation surcharge or some kind of thing, a one-time deal, where if you're Apple or any other company that has a lot of your assets held overseas, there will be a period of time where you can bring it all back for a very, very small tax rate. And what the Ryan office is saying is that this is going to result in $4,000 pay raise. Again, the pay raise is a result of reforms that help keep businesses in the U.S. and to bring jobs and capital back home from abroad. And this pay raise is even before tax cuts that Americans can expect to see. Today, America has one of the highest corporate tax rates in the industrialized world at 35%. By slashing this rate to 20% and bringing trillions of dollars in profits back home from overseas, we will unleash real wage growth not seen in a generation. Well, we hope that happens. Theoretically, it could, and it should happen, but the legislation does not contain language that requires American businesses to increase the salaries or pay of people that work there by whatever amount of money. So all of this is a calculation based on what benefits will derive from the tax reform package. So it's a little bit, tax reform will raise wages at least $4,000 on average. That just, I don't know. Yeah, corporations, businesses will have more money with a reduction of corporate tax rate and repatriation. But I guess they're calculating some of that's going to go to increased wages. But I don't think they're mandating that, so go figure. Okay. Obama, Trump didn't say that Obama never wrote or called families. He said that Obama and other presidents didn't do it as often as Trump does it. They didn't do it as often, and he corrected the way he said it later on, and then he asked, hey, you ask Obama, ask General Kelly if Obama called him after his son died. So anyway, the issue is being ramped up. And it's all designed, as far as the drive-bys are concerned, it's designed to show that Trump doesn't really care and that he's phony and he's self-focused. He's got this massive narcissistic ego, and he can't stop criticizing Obama, which is going to cause a knee-jerk reaction among the media anyway. So that is something else that just set the table with, and we'll get to as the program unfolds, on Hillary Clinton. She won't let go of this. It's getting embarrassing. It's getting embarrassing for her, although she doesn't sense that because she has such a feeling of entitlement and such a sense of having been cheated that she's lost all grounding in reality on this. And I think we are learning a lot about who Hillary Clinton really always has been in this little episode. She, like so many people on the left, considered her election to be a formality. It was that big a slam dunk. It had been fixed. It had been taken care of. Everybody had accepted it. Republicans and Democrats in Washington, everybody accepted it. Everybody was planning on it. Nobody thought Trump had a ghost of a chance after his first day announcing his candidacy. And they lived in denial about Trump throughout every Trump victory in the primaries and every Trump public rally. They were in utter denial. And so for how many years has Hillary Clinton been harboring this, I don't know if you call it dream, or this expectation that the presidency was hers and it was ordained and it was simply a matter of time. And now it's been denied to her forever, and she simply cannot deal with it. She's having the toughest time accepting it, and she's at it again. She's now saying that the Russian interference in the election was the cyber equivalent of 9/11, where 3,000 Americans died. She is comparing her defeat to 3,000 Americans dying on 9/11, which is an incredible statement to make. What's next? Is she going to compare her loss to the Holocaust? Is she going to say that her loss is the same thing as 6 million Jews perishing in World War II? Anyway, she's out claiming again the Russians hacked the election to undermine our democracy. But who has done more to undermine our democracy than Hillary Clinton, who not only claims the election last November was stolen, but she has claimed that the election in 2004 was stolen in Ohio. That's when John Kerry only needed 55,000 votes to win Ohio, and he could have been president. And they think that the election in 2000 was stolen, the Florida recount in the Supreme Court. If you listen to Hillary Clinton, there hasn't been a legitimate election in this country since the year 2000, and she's just the latest victim. She told some interviewers in Australia, one of the two, that Putin helped Trump win because Putin doesn't like her. And then she said that Julian Assange helped Putin help Trump win because Julian Assange doesn't like her. Now, all this time, I thought Trump was supposed to be the paranoid nutcase. But Hillary Clinton is declaring that she owns that title. Julian Assange, for his part, had a good response to her attacks. He tweeted that Hillary was not a credible person, that there was something wrong with her. He tweeted, it's not just her constant lying. It's not just that she throws off menacing glares and seethes this thwarted entitlement. Something much darker rides along with it, a cold creepiness rarely seen. And whatever you think of Julian Assange, that is a fairly accurate description. She's Nurse Ratched. But folks, now she's falling down again, breaking her toe and showing up late for interviews. Book signings are a disaster whenever she deigns to have one. She was speaking at the South Bank Centre London Literature Festival. She noted before going on stage that she had met with the London mayor, Sadiq Khan, who told her that Trump played by Fight Club rules and she played by boxing rules. So she's got everybody on her side claiming that she was cheated against. Or just cheated, period. But 9/11... And now that Julian Assange colluded with Russia to help Trump win. And then there's this. This is the pièce de résistance. It is not just Hillary. The entire left, folks, the truth of the matter is these people are losing their minds. And they have been losing their minds ever since Trump won. Well, actually, I think it predates that. Newsweek magazine. Is it even a magazine anymore? Newsweek magazine barely exists. You talk about an implosion. Newsweek magazine, or whatever it now is, Newsweek website, it is an embarrassment. They have their latest, I guess what they would call cover story, how Hillary Clinton still can and should become president after the Trump-Russia investigation. And this is written by a woman whose name is Julia Glum. Does that not fit perfect? Julia Glum writing about Hillary Clinton, how she can and should still become president. You want to hear what needs to happen? Sure, it's been more than 340 days since Trump won, but there's still a very narrow, highly unlikely, and entirely unprecedented way that Clinton could become president. And it has some Democrat diehards dreaming again, including Julia Glum. No doubt. Why else would she be publishing this nonsense? Harvard professor Lawrence Lessig offered Hillary Clinton a path to the presidency on Medium, the website. He put forward a series of scenarios that lead to Paul Ryan becoming president and then handing the White House keys to Hillary Clinton. Lessig is a constitutional law expert. Here is how, and this is what the Democrats are telling themselves. Well, I don't know how many, but this is what the Hillary camp is telling itself, and this is what they're telling the media. And it has some support. It has some acolytes. And it's one of these, if this happens, then this has to happen. And then if that happens, then this next thing has to happen. And then if that all happens, then the next thing has to happen. So here's the scenario. If Trump is definitely found to have colluded directly with Russia, he would be forced to resign or be impeached. If Trump is removed, Vice President Mike Pence would become president. Then if Pence becomes president, he should resign too, given that he benefited from the Russian cheating. And then if Pence resigns, before appointing a vice president, Paul Ryan would become president as the next in order as the Secretary Speaker of the House. And then if that happens, if Ryan becomes president, he should do the right thing and choose Clinton for vice president, and then Ryan should resign. And that is how Hillary can become president. And you want to talk about diluted? You want to talk about the Democrat Party imploding? This is considered, this is a Harvard law professor putting this out, which means in the sewer of its Twitter, it's going to have some support, and Mrs. Clinton's going to be fully buying into it. This is absurd. I mean, of all of these things, if Pence resigns before appointing a vice president, that means Ryan would automatically become president, and Ryan, because of his great sense of honor, should resign, fully aware that the Republicans don't deserve the White House after all of this cheating with the Russians. And since he has chosen Hillary to be his vice president, she would then become president. Now, this Lessig guy writes this. The answer seems unavoidable. He should nominate the person defeated by the treason of his own party, this is Ryan, and then step aside and let Hillary become president. Without doubt, if Ryan did the right thing, that would be the most extraordinary event in the history of America since the Confederate Army fired on Fort Sumter. But unlike that, this event would build the Union, not divide it. What drugs are these people taking? What are they smoking? Now, one thing, don't doubt for a moment that this is why Comey and company made sure there was a special counsel, and this is why Mueller has hired 16 Hillary loyalists as staffers. Because this scenario, in one convoluted way or another, has been the plot since shortly after November 9th of last year. Now, this name Lessig, they may ring some bells. He briefly ran for the Democrat nomination in 2015. Oh, he adds one thing, that after Hillary becomes president by virtue of Paul Ryan resigning in honor, that Hillary would appoint him as vice president out of political goodwill in an effort to unite America. Now, this all sounds insane, and it sounds unhinged, but believe me, this is why the Mueller investigation, this is why the special counsel was named. I'm telling you, the people inside the Beltway, the swamp, the elites, whatever you want to call them, this is the pipe dream, getting rid of Trump. And it doesn't stop at getting rid of Trump. It doesn't stop until they get Hillary what is rightfully hers. And this is how insane it sounds when it's committed to paper by them. But this is what they're aiming for. And therefore, there are some of these people who literally think this has potential. But it all relies on Mueller now. It all relies on somebody being able to prove irrefutably that Trump and Russia colluded specifically to cheat Hillary. But as our next series of stories will demonstrate, if there was any collusion with the Russians, it looks like it was Obama and the Clintons starting in 2009. And it involves the American uranium supply. And this is not brand new. We've known about this uranium deal for years, ever since Peter Schweizer's book. But what we didn't know was that the FBI has evidence of the collusion, and they shelved it. Hang on. We'll be back and continue after this. All right, we're going to get to the phones here, but I just want to give you the headline from the John Solomon story at thehill.com. FBI uncovered Russian bribery plot before Obama regime approved controversial nuclear deal with Moscow. There's real collusion, and the FBI uncovered the Russians bribing people even before the Obama administration approved the deal, which means the bribery might have been to get the deal done. There's real collusion. This story's a bombshell. It shows up in thehill.com and won't show up anywhere else. Well, not on the drive-bys. There may be another report elsewhere that details much the same, but it will never be in the mainstream because it defies and flies in the face of the story they are trying to create still to this day on Trump colluding with the Russians. Now to the phones, we start with Brent in Cleveland. Welcome, sir. Great to have you with us.
Hello. Thank you for having me on. I just wanted to make the point that the $4,000 that Speaker Ryan is speaking of may be just kind of a moot point, because if you bring in $2 trillion into the American economy, we're probably going to see a huge increase in inflation. And so that even could be where he's getting the $4,000 is just a simple price increase of inflation.
Well, I'm not sure that that's where he's getting the $4,000 unless you're saying that the resulting inflation from infusing the economy with that much money repatriated would cause salaries to approximate expanding by $4,000 a year. But of course, if it's inflation induced, then there's no net benefit to it. And that's not what Ryan's saying. What Ryan's saying, hey, our tax reform is going to get you a $4,000 a year raise. That's what it says. Now, I'm sorry, folks. I'm the mayor of Realville. I can't read something like that and simply go, right on, man, right on. Let's do it. Let's have tax reform and get everybody on average, a $4,000 a year raise. It's based on the fact that American corporations are going to have a whole bunch of money in America to use that they can't use now because they can't bring it back because the tax rate's too high. So they're going to lower the corporate tax rate plus make a one-time offer of very low taxes on the repatriated amount. That's going to equal more money being held by American businesses domestically, and that means that everybody gets a $4,000 raise? Is there something in the bill that mandates businesses pay higher wages with the money? Now, he's got to mean something. Because of my analysis of this, I mean, anybody's, not just me, that was going to look at this with giant question marks. They've put this out the way they've put it out. They have to be able to back it up with something. I just can't figure out what it is. Because government doesn't give you a raise unless you're on welfare. And for that to happen, they have to take money from somebody else to do it. Redistribution of income. They're not talking about this as redistribution. They're talking about this as corporations having more money equaling corporations paying employees more. Now, theoretically, it'd be wonderful. And it may happen in some places, but it may not. You know, not all employers are nice. That may come as a surprise to you. Anyway, I may be overthinking this, but as the mayor of Realville and America's supreme literalist, I need to have this one explained to me. The inflationary aspect of this, I had not considered. So I guess we just shouldn't do it at all then, right? All right, I'm being facetious. I was only kidding when I said, I hadn't thought about the inflationary aspects. Maybe we better not cut taxes. I was joking, folks. Now, we have a break here at the top of the hour. Come back, McCain dumping all over Trump yet again, and American nationalism. And, of course, the latest trick by the NFL to get the players to stop kneeling. Well, it's not a trick. It's against us, if it is. Welcome back, folks. Rush Limbaugh saying more in 5 seconds than most programs say in an entire day here at the Excellence in Broadcasting Network and the Limbaugh Institute. 800-282-2882 if you want to be on the program. Couple recent examples of political correctness. I don't know how many of you use Google Maps, but Google Maps just issued an update to the app that they had to withdraw in less than 24 hours. Google Maps included a new feature, and let me describe it for you. Let's say you're in Manhattan, and you need to go from point A to point B, and you put those addresses in, and it calculates your route and tells you how long it's going to take you to get there if you're driving, or if you take public transit, or if you're walking. They added something new. They put a little bubble next to the map showing your route that said if you walk, you'll burn this many calories. If you walk these 8 blocks, it said you'll burn 35 calories. And then it listed the caloric content of several foods, like a piece of pie has 250 calories or whatever. They had to pull the app. Had to pull that upgrade. They had to pull the feature out of it in less than 24 hours because of outrage that erupted on Twitter. Now, why do you think the outrage happened? People were made to feel nervous and ashamed. Google thought they were fat. Why else would Google put how many calories I'll burn by walking if they didn't think I was fat? Google was accused of fat shaming. Google was accused of embarrassing people. Google was accused of pointing out people's flaws, and Google had to remove that one little tab. It was a bubble that showed how many calories you would burn if you walked the route. You believe this? Do you believe we have this much insecurity lurking on Twitter? That people could be shocked and outraged and made to feel scared and pointed out and shamed simply because the amount of calories you would burn if you walked the route happened to be displayed. Google thought they were performing a service. Look, I got no brief for Google. Don't misunderstand. I couldn't care less one way or the other. I don't use Google Maps. Not the point. Who are these people? What in the world has gotten into them that they cannot look at a bubble that shows how many calories they would burn by walking 8 blocks without having an overreaction demanding that the app fix itself and take that bit of information out of it because it's fat shaming. I mean, it just boggles the mind. And the second example, Apple has a new vice president of diversity. She is an African-American woman by the name of Smith. Look, it's a hyphenated. It's three names. Denise Young Smith. She's African American. She's the company's vice president of diversity and inclusion. Let me ask you, people who are older than 40, what would you have thought if, in your 20s and 30s, your company had named somebody to the position of vice president of diversity and inclusion? I'll tell you what my reaction was. Why are you throwing money away on that instead of giving everybody raises? What do you need a VP of diversity for? Isn't that part of the corporate culture anyway? It's like, why do companies need vice president of environmental policy? All of this is a sop. All of it's a sop to the media. All of it's a sop to left-wing, politically correct snowflakes. Well, anyway, let me tell you what this woman did. She did something that's actually very smart, filled with common sense, but it violated every tenet of diversity. And in the process, Denise Young Smith inadvertently forced everybody to admit what diversity really is. These people that run around talking about America's strength is in our diversity. And what do they mean by that? Well, let me just tell you, it has nothing to do with merit. It has nothing to do with meeting and setting high expectations. Nothing. It's strictly skin color. It's strictly gender and gender orientation, sexual orientation. That's all it is. So this woman was at a diversity conference. I guess that's where vice presidents of diversity and inclusion do. That's what they spend their time at. They go to conferences where diversity and inclusion are discussed. And she made the point that there can be 12. Now, remember, she's African American, and she's at a diversity conference here. And since she works at Apple, everybody's expecting the latest and greatest, totally 100% correct, politically correct. She said there can be 12 white, blue-eyed, blonde men in a room, and they're going to be diverse too, because they're going to bring a different life experience and life perspective to the conversation. Each one of them is different, and they're going to have their own take, and even in such an arrangement, you could have diversity. The internet blew up. This woman was held up as an example of the absolute worst example of somebody as a vice president of diversity, and that Apple needed to fire her. So she did what everybody would expect, and she apologized, and she begged forgiveness. She said that this is obviously insensitive, and it was erroneous, and she wasn't aware, didn't know what had come over her, but she will not make this mistake again. Now, in point of fact, she was right the first time, because diversity should have nothing to do with skin color. But when we're talking about liberalism and the left, it's all surface stuff. It has nothing, because in their world, everybody's supposed to think the same, and everybody's supposed to be the same, and everybody's supposed to have the same outcomes. The only thing that makes them different is their skin color. And since there are fewer African Americans and fewer whatever in America, since the white is still the majority, they must always pay the price. And what Denise Young Smith did was openly and inadvertently cause all of these politically correct numbskulls to admit that diversity has nothing to do with anything substantive. It has everything to do with things people have no control over. And so the next time you hear people, well, what makes America great is our diversity. It doesn't. The diversity they're talking about, skin color and racial diversity, sexual orientation diversity, or gender diversity, doesn't mean diddly squat in terms of substance. Because that first statement is exactly right on the money. I'm trying to figure out how she got hired if she thinks this way, because Apple they lead the league in politically correct statements, behavior, thinking, and so forth. And this clearly does not fall under the rubric of political correctness. 12 white, blue-eyed blonde men in a room, and they're going to be diverse too, because they're going to bring a different life experience and life perspective to the conversation. Now, if Apple thinks that having a diversity of life experiences and background is important, fine. But then, or anybody, why use skin color, national origin, or sex as a definition of what people grew up to be? How in the world is that? What a skimpy and what a narrow and what a limiting way to define people. By virtue of the color of their skin. And look who's doing all this. Your good old buddies, the Democrats and the leftists. John McCain has had it in for Donald Trump, I don't know for how long. I think McCain's had it in for Trump even before Trump ran for president. But you remember, shortly after Trump announced, the name McCain came up, and Trump made it clear that he doesn't respect military people that get captured. You remember the fallout from that. I mean, the media, a lot of people were just aghast. How can you say that? This man is a national hero. He was tortured for his country. And Trump didn't back down from it. So you can understand McCain seething about this and not letting it go. And he hasn't. He delighted in thumbs down his vote, killing the latest attempt to reform Obamacare in the Senate. And now he made a speech. He just blasted nationalism. And by extension, he blasted Trump. And he's blasting everything about Trump that people like and support. Here, it was in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. McCain was awarded the Liberty Medal. And here's a portion of what he said.
To fear the world we have organized and led the 3/4 of a century, to abandon the ideals we have advanced around the globe, to refuse the obligations of international leadership and our duty to remain the last best hope of Earth, for the sake of some half-baked, spurious nationalism cooked up by people who would rather find scapegoats than solve problems, is as unpatriotic as an attachment to any other tired dogma of the past that Americans consigned to the ash heap of history.
Okay, now let's parse this, because there are a lot of people, and you heard the applause, a lot of people who agree with McCain on this. To fear the world we have organized. This is fascinating to me. McCain clearly is a member of the establishment. He's a proud member of the establishment. He's probably on the committee that determines who gets in and who gets thrown out. He is demonstrating here a perfect illustration for anybody wondering who the establishment is or what they think. McCain has spelled it out for you. To fear the world we have organized. Now, this stems from the belief that America is great, that America is the good guys, that America is the solution to the world's problems, that America is the last best hope of Earth. And that we have organized means we as the beacon of freedom, we as the nation which fights for it and which defends it and seeks it for anybody who wants it. We have fought our own wars. We have helped other nations in wars where their freedom was at stake. We have rebuilt Europe, the Marshall Plan we've done. All of these things constitute what McCain means when he says the world we have organized. This is a profound belief in the power of the United States. And then he adds, the world we have organized and led for 3/4 of a century. Believe me, he's talking about the period of time, basically post-Depression, World War I, all the way to the end of the 20th century. To refuse the obligations of international leadership, meaning we have shaped the world. We have organized it. We have determined the good and the bad. We lead the fight against bad and evil. We define the good. But now, Trump and his nationalism want to refuse the obligations to continue the leadership role that we gave ourselves in the past 75 years, and to refuse these obligations of international leadership and to refuse our duty as a result of this leadership to remain the last best hope of Earth for the sake of some stupid nationalism like getting rid of NAFTA and putting America first and making America great again. That's junk stuff to McCain. There is no making America great. America already is great. What do you mean? We're the world leader in this. We're the world leader in that. We organize the world. The world is ours, and it bends to our will. And why do we want to abrogate? That's what McCain thinks, and that's what the establishment thinks. And then he goes on to say this is unpatriotic as an attachment to any other tired dogma of the past that Americans can do. What's wrong with all this? Theoretically, it's right on the money. But what's wrong with it all? I mean, the answers kind of leap out at you, don't they? It's not any great mystery. The world we have organized? Well, maybe we did, but it's falling apart. And we haven't been leading the world in I don't know what area for however long. We have been led by people who want to diminish the role of the United States in the world. Senator McCain, this is the problem. What you're missing, sir, about this nationalism that you despise is what its real intention is to once again assert this leadership of the world, to assert this guiding light and beacon of freedom. Because for way too many recent years, people in your club have been buying into the notion that whatever the United States has been doing the last 75 years has been hurting people. The United States is the problem. The United States is blamed for climate change. What is that? Destroying the planet, no less. The United States is blamed for this. It's blamed for that. We have to sit here and listen to how socialist and communist worlds and nations are much preferable to ours. What world do we lead? The United Nations exists to fleece the United States, to blame the United States. Barack Obama openly admitted that his purpose was to transform the United States, which means cut it down to size. It was Barack Obama who started this process of taking America out of the leadership role, and you couldn't say enough good things about him, Senator McCain. It was Barack Obama and his two terms and everybody he hired to work with him who set about to make Iran a nuclear power. How in the world would a United States-led world permit that to happen for the good of humanity? Senator McCain, with all due respect, you've got this totally backwards. Your club or members in your club were actively presiding over the decline of the United States as a leader in the world, as a beacon of your definition of open and leading the world is to open our borders and let the disadvantaged race in. Sorry, that's not what leadership of the world means. But too many people think leadership of the world meant we need to act on our guilt. We have guilt that we are so wealthier, so richer, so more advanced than most nations on earth. It isn't fair. And so we must let the downtrodden in because we've made them downtrodden. That's what your club has started turning this country into. And that's why people are standing up against it. I'm glad Senator McCain made this speech, because this is one of this little bite here, this 39-second bite, is one of the greatest illustrations of what the establishment thinks. And, well, that's not altogether true, because there are many in the establishment who don't think this way at all. This is Senator McCain's view of the United States' role in the world is probably one that was held by most people at least as recently as 1980, 85. And prior to that, although the United States' role in the world has always sought to be undermined, and from inside our borders as well, the effort to undermine the United States began shortly after it was founded. And it's had its ups and downs. We've always had Americans who hate America. We've always had colonists who didn't want America to be founded. So this is nothing new. But McCain's view of the United States' role in the world was at one time true. You might have to go back to the 50s, actually, for this specific delineation of responsibilities to be accurate. But that's not, certainly in the last 20 years, this is not at all what the United States' role in the world has been. And especially the last 8 years, the United States, the purpose was to cut us down to size and make us pay our price. All right, I want to go through this one more time. I really think this is important. Grab McCain's soundbite. We're going to stop this. Again, it's last night in Philadelphia. McCain has a big problem with Donald Trump. I'm sure that he personally despises him and professionally despises him. And in a way, I mean, if somebody had said, I don't respect people that get captured, blah, 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 you'd understand it. McCain holds grudges here, and he's got a serious problem with Trump. But all that aside, this little excerpt, again, is so valuable in explaining what old establishmentarian guys, the way they viewed the role of the United States in the world, and how it isn't any longer anywhere close to this. But McCain, as a dinosaur and a Jurassic Park resident, remembers the good old days when he came of age and joined this club. And it tells you so much about how McCain has voted on legislation. Here, let's go at this quick start-stop. We'll get back to the phones after this, and we'll move on to reaction to this from other senators and Trump. But here it is.
To fear the world we have organized.
Stop tape. What McCain is saying, you people have voted for Trump and Trump. You fear the world. You are afraid. But the United States organized the world. We are the power in the world. We're the superpower. We organize this world the way it is. And he next says, and led for 3/4 of a century.
Led the 3/4 of a century to abandon the ideals we have advanced around the globe, to refuse the obligations of international leadership.
Stop tape. We're no longer advancing these ideals. We're not advancing anything. We're being cut down to size. The Barack Obama administration sought to blame the United States for most of the problems in the world, as does the United Nations, as does most every other unallied nation, which is really just harboring feelings of jealousy and envy and hatred toward the United States, because no matter what they do, they can never equate us. They can never equal us. They can never outproduce us. They can never outcompete us. They couldn't beat us militarily. And so they have a degree of dislike, envy, or hate for us. But the ideals, and there were days when the American ideal did lead the world, where the American ideal did shape the world. That's what we're all trying to get back to. But before that can happen, the United States needs to be reconstituted and rebuilt. Because we've just had too many years of too many people believing that the United States is the problem in the world, that the United States has guilt or should have guilt over the great disparities in the world between ourselves and other nations, economics, wealth, these kinds of things. You will get most of the world's problems, and you'll find the popular thing to do is to blame the United States for it. Climate change is the first thing on the list. Our advanced lifestyle just happens to be doing what? Destroying the planet. That is a serious, serious charge. Destroying the planet. And they got all kinds of young people believing it. What's the fix? United States must downsize. United States must admit its guilt. United States must agree with whatever the United Nations claims and alleges and accuses us of doing, and we must understand that they're right, and we must admit that they've got a grievance, and we must do what we can to apologize for the way we have structured the world and the way we have led the world, because we have imposed freedom in too many places. We have imposed and stood up for liberty in too many places, where liberty and freedom are not the choice of tyrants and dictators and other oppressors who lead most other nations on earth. Let's continue with this.
And our duty to remain the last best hope of earth for the sake of some half-baked, spurious nationalism cooked up by people who would rather find scapegoats than solve problems.
All right, stop the tape. We are trying to once again claim that mantle of last best hope on earth. But Senator McCain, the United States is not the last best hope of earth when, for example, we are forced to open our borders and let specifically the downtrodden into our country without any limit and without any concern. All of that is based on guilt, that somehow we have made them downtrodden, that we have enforced their poverty, that we are the reason they can't get ahead in life because we have shaped the world in this ill-gotten way. And so we owe it to the people we have deprived to come to our country and get what's theirs because we have made sure that they can't get it. And this is what's guiding immigration policy. Well, that and voter registration, of course. But the last best hope of the world was being destroyed. It was being chipped away. It was being torn down to size where it couldn't lead anything because Barack Obama was doing everything he could to cement the idea that the problems in the world originated with the United States from the days of our founding. And all that's happening today, Senator McCain, is an attempt to bring this country back to these ideals you spoke so lovingly about. It's what we all want. We all believe the United States is a force for good. We all believe the United States is the beacon of hope and liberty for people in the world. We all believe the United States is the last best hope. But it was being torn apart. It was being torn down. It was being blamed. And it had help from people inside our own country. And finally, enough people have said, stop. We're not the problem in the world. We are the solution. And that's all that's happening here. I just think Senator McCain has lost track of what's been going on the last 30 years, certainly the last 8 years. Quickly, Tom Cotton, Senator Cotton from Arkansas. Fox and Friends today, Brian Kilmeade interviewed him. He said, in a time where there's a lot of Republican and foreign relations sparring with the president, you're not. In fact, you're going the opposite way. Why is that?
The American people elected Donald Trump to be our commander-in-chief. If we want to keep our country safe and secure, then it's important that the commander-in-chief succeed. And I think Donald Trump, by and large, is getting things right. He's certainly much more consistent with decades of bipartisan foreign policy leadership than Barack Obama was for the last 8 years. So when the president does things like tells Congress and tells our allies that the Iran deal is not in the United States' national security interest, I'm going to support him.
Exactly, because it isn't. There's no world leadership. The United States is not organizing and leading the world for good when it allows the largest state sponsor of terrorism to freely acquire nuclear technology and ultimately nuclear weapons. What is the sense in that? What kind of leadership is that you want to exude and praise? That's just stupid. That's just dumb. It's dangerous, and it's rooted in this crazy belief. Well, as Obama said, nobody told us when we want to do nukes that we could. Who are we to tell any nation they can't? Well, now, wait a minute. Senator McCain used to be one of those guys that said, for the sake of the world, American leadership, we would determine who and who doesn't get these kinds of weapons. We're now trying to stop Kim Jong-un from using whatever he's got. Nobody has any opposition to that. But why are the same people eager for the Iranians to get theirs? And sadly, one of the reasons is that people want to do business with them. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on here, but this nationalism, this populism that's coming under assault, its real purpose is to once again reassert the United States as the leader of the world and the organizer of liberty and freedom in the world and the defender of liberty and freedom in the world. Not to have the United States be seen as responsible for the world's problems, which is what the swamp currently is constituted as, which is what the American elites, the United Nations, the Ivy League schools are all teaching. That the problems in the world are born of the United States dominance. And that's what justifies cutting us down in size. And there are a lot of Americans who don't think ill of our country. They still love it, think it's great, the best place on earth, and want every place on earth to be as close as it can to becoming like the United States. That'd be the best thing that could happen for the world's population. A redistribution of capitalism all over the world. The simplest, fastest eradication of poverty known to man. But it isn't going to happen if people like the New York Times get their way. Let me show you this latest story. Admit that we have a roaring economy, right? They can't hide it. The unemployment numbers at an all-time low. Consumer sentiment, optimism in the economy is raging. It is not at an all-time high, but it's on a big, big upswing. The economic news, we have more people in the labor force than we had the last 8 years. We have economic growth happening at faster rates than it ever did under 8 years of Obama. So, just as when Bill Clinton was president, we got stories on how lying was good, and lying saved people their hurt feelings. Little white lie here, little white lie there. Why, that is really actually preferable to honesty sometimes. We got story after story like this. Well, now that we're in a booming economy, the New York Times headline, how a healthy economy can shorten lifespans. The American economy will kill you, according to the New York Times. You have a greater chance of dying in a healthy economy because lifespans shorten. You don't need to read this. The headline says it all. The health of a nation's economy and the health of its people are connected, but in some surprising ways. At times like these, when the economy is strong and unemployment is low, research has found that death rates rise. Remember when unemployment was skyrocketing under Obama? Remember what we were told? This is the greatest news that we've ever had. People are rediscovering their families now with their free time. And it was a new term was coined, fun employment, where you could finally go out, as Pelosi said, write that poem you've always wanted to write. Paint that painting you've always wanted to paint. You're not locked into a job anymore. You can actually be as free as you've ever wanted thanks to Obama's unemployment statistics. So now we have a roaring economy. We have things happening economically in this country that we haven't seen in years. And, of course, it has to be bad. Don't ever doubt me when I tell you that there's some entities in this country that will do whatever they can to empower leftists, including cut this country down to size, chop it down, incur great damage, cause great damage to happen to it. How a healthy economy can shorten lifespans? Really? Seriously, New York Times? Where did this idea come from? We'll be right back here, folks. Back in July, I think it was July of this year, it might have been July of last year, when Trump was heading into Phoenix, and McCain said that Trump was coming in to fire up the crazies. So he called Trump supporters crazies, much like Hillary called them deplorables. And Hillary and McCain are both from the swamp, and they both have this jaundiced view of the United States' role in the world, leadership, that we've set it up, and we have an obligation to continue to serve the world and lead it because we organized it. We determined who's an ally and who isn't. We determined who's going to be a friend and who. And at one time, folks, a long time ago, that's exactly what happened. That was exactly what happened after World War II. Exactly. But it was all done in the interests of the United States. It was all done with the national interest of the United States paramount. And that hasn't been the case for I don't know how long, but certainly the last 8 years. I could keep going on this for the rest of the hour, but you get the point. I need to get to the phones. Raleigh, North Carolina. Evan, you're next, sir. Hi.
Rush, it's an honor to talk to you. I'm 39. I've been listening to you for basically since you started. So thank you for taking my call.
I appreciate that.
Just a couple, I was listening to McCain, and I was listening to the segment you had about Apple, and I think there's one disconnect that liberals have with conservatives or Republicans. It's people often say that this country is great because it's diverse, and that's well and good. It is actually really great to have that diversity, but the origin of it is our country is diverse because it's great. If this was such a terrible place to be, nobody would have come here. We have all these diverse people and opinions because people wanted to come to this country because of the opportunities that it afforded everybody. And I think that's just a pure, simple disconnect between the way I think of things and the way others do.
You guys exactly right. I would say that the foundation for all that you said is freedom. Freedom was the magnet. Freedom. And everything freedom entails. Without freedom, entrepreneurism doesn't exist. Without freedom, greatness doesn't exist. Without freedom, controversy doesn't exist. It was freedom that drew people to the United States. And it was our Constitution that guaranteed no limits on that freedom in the Bill of Rights. It was specified things government could not do. That served as the magnet. And, of course, it drew all kinds of people here. But it is the Constitution and our founding documents that make America great. The left will tell you that what makes America great is our diversity. And to them, we now know all that means is skin color. The reason for that is they have an agenda. Their agenda is anti-anything in power. And that means victimizing everybody that isn't in power. So that they have been on the attack against white men and women who are Christian. That's basically what the left's enemy, who the left's enemy has been. Now, they don't specify it that way. They specify it with different terminology. They talk about power versus weakness, discrimination, inequality, unequalness, all this kind of stuff. But if you look at who they're attacking and if you look at who they fear, it's very clear. And so dividing people is also paramount in liberalism. You have to divide people. You have to create the chaos. You have to create victims. You have to create people who are willing to blame everybody but themselves for whatever is wrong in their lives. And once you do that, then you can set up bogeymen. And the two bogeymen that have been the most successful for the left are the Republican Party and conservatives. They have been those who have caused all these victims such pain by way of racism, bigotry, sexism, homophobia, and discrimination, and you name it. And so dividing people by things that don't really matter in terms of who a person is simply how they create numbers for their strength in battle, because it stands to reason. Take all the minorities and add them together, and you're going to have a greater power, greater force than whatever majority that you are fighting. Back in just a second. Okay, now we have some more to go here on Trump and his supposed controversy over getting in touch with the families of men and women killed in action. Media trying to make a big deal out of that. We still have some stuff to touch on the NFL, and they're having meetings today about how to stop these anthem protests, and they've come up with an idea that some of the players seem eager to sign on to. We'll share all that with you and whatever else happens. We get back. You see, it doesn't get any better than this. I've had the phone fully charged for an hour and 18 minutes, been sitting here doing nothing, and it's only showing 5 minutes of usage. I mean, that's ideal. You cannot get any better than that. That's all these people. Battery problem. Well, I need to do a clinic on this. You know, maybe a third hour on all of this stuff sometime. Anyway, greetings and welcome back, folks. Great to have you. I mentioned at the top of the program that there are a couple of stories today that talk about how great Trump is doing, how great America is doing, and I think there's no better time to get into those than right now, following the McCain soundbite where he complains about Trump tearing apart, and Trump voters tearing apart this great world order that the United States created 75 years ago and has been leading for 75 years, and that somehow we're abrogating our worldwide responsibilities. Nothing could be further from this. We're trying to reassemble all of that. We're trying to put America greatness back together because for too many years it's been under assault. Look, I'm repeating myself. But here's the first story, and it's by Jean Yarbrough. You probably have not heard of her. She is the Gary Pendy Senior Professor of Social Sciences at Bowdoin College. That's in Maine. I think it's Bowdoin. Might be Bowdoin. I've never heard it pronounced. I've only read it, and so I don't really know how it's pronounced. She teaches courses in political philosophy and American political thought, and her latest book, Theodore Roosevelt and the American Political Tradition, which was published in 2012, won the Richard Neustadt Prize for Best Book of that year, published on the American presidency. Now, this article of hers appears in the City Journal, and the headline, Trump and Tocqueville. For all his bluster, the president has championed values that built America as Tocqueville saw it. Now, at the risk of insulting some of you, I need to explain who Alexis de Tocqueville was. I doubt that Tocqueville is taught much in American primary and secondary education, and I doubt that Tocqueville is actually mentioned much in our so-called institutions of higher learning in academe. In 1831, when Andrew Jackson was president, Alexis de Tocqueville visited the United States. And he was appalled by the vulgarity and mediocrity of American politics. After meeting Andrew Jackson, Tocqueville concluded that the low tone of American society started at the top. And in the estimation of Alexis de Tocqueville, Andrew Jackson was a man of violent character and middling capacity. Worse, he seemed to have no talent for politics. He rode roughshod over his personal enemies in a way no president had done and treated members of Congress with disdain. Nothing in all the course of his career had ever proved that he had the requisite qualities to govern a free people. This is what Tocqueville wrote in Democracy in America. So the majority of the enlightened classes of America had always been opposed to him. Now, Tocqueville ended up concluding just the opposite. Tocqueville wrote perhaps one of the best analyses and perceptions of why America was great. He's French, obviously. One of the best explanations and descriptions of this country by anybody, American, non-American. Considering his view of Andrew Jackson, imagine what Tocqueville's first impressions of Trump might be. Real estate mogul, host of The Apprentice, owner of beauty pageants. Trump would seem to confirm Tocqueville's worst fears about debased standards of American life and leadership, and yet Trump campaigned on issues that had a Tocquevillian resonance. Put another way, Tocqueville highlighted certain dangers to democratic liberty and greatness that Trump instinctively seized on to win the presidency. Now, her reference to Tocqueville here highlights one of the negative aspects or observations that he had. But in general, Tocqueville had an appreciation and an understanding for the United States that some, even born and raised in America, didn't get. explanations of American greatness, and it was all found, in his view, in America's culture and morality and religiosity. Well, and America's politics as well. And Tocqueville is cited constantly by people who think America has lost its way. Tocqueville is viewed as, go back and read Tocqueville's description of America and you'll find what we should be again. Now, Gene Yarborough's point is that for all of his bluster, Donald Trump has championed the values that built America and made it great as Tocqueville saw it. Trump has reignited a great party debate over the proper role of the administrative state in the American constitutional order. At stake is something more fundamental than material interest. It is the capacity of Americans to govern ourselves, both directly and through our elected representatives. And it is this self-government, the confidence and the freedom and the self-esteem that came from self-governance that Tocqueville cited as something he had never seen anywhere in the world. Literally, the American people ran their country. And as such, America's best interests were always on display, and America's best self was always on display. And it dazzled him, and it blew him away. He wrote extensively about it. And Gene Yarborough here is saying that what really is happening here, since Trump was inaugurated and began during the campaign, is that Americans are once again demonstrating the capacity to govern themselves, both directly and through elected representatives. In other words, Americans are now turning away from government as nanny, government as Santa Claus. Now, not everybody, obviously. There's still a lot of people that hate Trump, but we're talking about a trend here. And what Ms. Yarborough is actually getting at is an explanation of why Trump is succeeding and why nobody can separate his supporters from him, and what that means in terms of what's happening in America. And it's ultimately all good. That Americans, a number of Americans, enough to win a presidential election, are turning away from the idea that every problem in life must be and can only be solved by government. That people are grabbing hold of their own lives again, and they are utilizing self-determination, which is causing a rising instance of confidence in a burgeoning number of Americans, a rising amount of satisfaction with their lives because there is much more control over those lives being exercised by people who are living them, as opposed to anointed administrative state people in bureaucracies in a faraway and distant capital. And this is what she thinks is happening. She writes, Tocqueville had been struck by Americans' love of country. He hadn't seen that anywhere else in the world. Love of country. As such, Tocqueville would not be surprised by the appeal of Donald Trump's full-throated patriotism, especially when set against his critics who champion multiculturalism and globalization. For Alexis de Tocqueville, national identity was bound up with religion, which in the United States and in Europe meant Christianity. And Tocqueville said that that was the foundational base of the greatness of America. And don't forget, First Amendment, people talk about freedom of speech and so forth. The freedom of religion clause is why our founders fled Europe. They were denied the ability to worship as they pleased, why the Pilgrims came and began it all. And when America, as constituted, began to grow, with that as the foundation, there was no stopping its greatness because of the virtue and the morality that were contained inside of everyone's religious beliefs. And this is what Tocqueville was literally blown away by. He had not seen it anywhere in the world. Long before the 2016 presidential election, Democrats had clearly come to regard Christianity as an obstacle to their goals. Now, why do you think that is? Because I think she's right. Why would Democrats think Christianity is an obstacle to their goals? Because it all relies on who is God. They want government to be God. That's not an exaggeration. That's not to be flippant. And they will never say it. You have to ascertain this by looking at the way they live and what they consider to be inviolate. You cannot violate the tenets of climate change, for example. You cannot violate the tenets of much of their beliefs. Their beliefs are their religion. But Christians, of course, look to the God of creation, the God of the Bible. So there's a competing God, and the Democrats and leftists everywhere, not just in America, leftists everywhere, communists especially, need to wipe out God, the God of the Bible, because there can only be one God, and that will be the state. The old Soviets had all kinds of games they played with young kids to prove there was no God. And one of the simplest things they would do in a class of a bunch of sixth graders or the equivalent, first graders too, bring in 2 potted plants. One of them they would ignore for a period of a week or so. The other they would water and nurture and care for. And they would send the one they were ignoring, they were leaving it up to God to protect and grow. And of course, that flower, that plant died. It withered away. But the other potted plant grew and flowered and bloomed. And so the little kids were shown that there was no God. And if there was a God, look at how he didn't care about that poor plant. If he didn't care about that plant, he probably doesn't care about me. But my state cares about that plant. It was this kind of subtle, and if that didn't take, it wasn't so subtle, psychological games that were played. And it's always been one of the fundamental differences between, well, not always, the Democrat Party's abrogation of God of the Bible is, in terms of our founding, somewhat recent, meaning in the last 50 to 75 years. Trump's campaign promise, she writes here, to drain the swamp, by which he means scaling back the administrative state that had risen up alongside the 3 branches of government, can be understood as an application of great party principles. It represented an attempt to limit the power of government's unaccountable, irremovable, and self-interested bureaucrats. Has not Trump focused on that? He's focused on this, regulations. He's constantly reminding many people how many regulations he's nixed and gotten rid of and how many he's going to continue to attack. Trump has begun to deliver on his commitments to roll back intrusive regulations through executive order. He's taken on the education bureaucracy and called for expanding parents' choices of schools, especially in the inner cities. His Secretary of Education recently announced the repeal of Obama-era expansion of Title IX regulations affecting educational institutions that get federal money. He has reined in the EPA's ever-growing regulatory power, and they're running around behaving like stuck pigs. He promised to take a hard look at the Paris Climate Accords, which Obama signed without Senate consultation. He has trimmed financial regulations that impeded recovery from the Great Recession. And his appointment of Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, along with impressive lower court nominations, signifies his intention to make sure the federal judiciary fulfills its role of limiting executive power. In short, Trump has reignited a great party debate over the proper role of the administrative state in the American constitutional order. And this is what has overwhelming support and unbreakable bonds. At stake is something more fundamental than material interest. It's the capacity of Americans to govern ourselves both directly and through our elected representatives. It is this sense of ownership of life again, of self-determination, which is fueling support for Donald Trump. The left will never understand it. And if they ever did understand it, they would be opposed and scared to death by it and do everything they could to stamp it out by expanding bureaucracy and expanding the powers and role of government to tell you what you can and can't do. Self-determination, liberty, freedom, those are problems for Democrats who want people to think of government as the solution and the answer to everything. So that's just one of these pieces. There's another piece in Roger Kimball, writing at AmericanGreatness.com, called "Yes, Trump is Winning." And it is it's an analysis of current events here and the things that Trump is doing that are not being reported that constitute just smashing the establishment, just literally pulverizing them. But I have to take a break here, and I'm going to get back to the phones when we get back, because I promised I'd do that. So sit tight. We're coming back before you even know it. Okay, so I'm told it's Bowdoin College, not Bowdoin. I didn't think it was Bowdoin. It sounds odd, but since it's East Coast, odd goes together with it, so I figured it could be Bowdoin, but it's Bowdoin. By the way, Trump has reacted to McCain. Trump's doing one syndicated radio show after another today. Radio Row is what they call this. Snerdley came in today, said, by the way, they called me at the White House today. I said, why? To tell you that they know you don't do guests, and they didn't even offer the president because they know that you can probably say what he's going to say better than he does anyway, so don't be offended that... I said, they said that? Well, pretty much, yeah. And that's true. Radio Row, I would not be there. But anyway, Trump is there, and he responded to McCain. Here, grab soundbite number 22. You can listen to what Trump said here. It's happened this afternoon, and he was asked about McCain's criticism, the soundbite that we played. This is what he said.
Yeah, well, I hear it, and people have to be careful because at some point I fight back. You know, I'm being very nice, but at some point I fight back, and it won't be pretty.
Yeah, well, we know that. I'm being very nice right now, but, you keep it up and I fight back. And it won't be pretty. Bud in Stowe, Ohio. Great to have you on the program, sir. How are you?
How you doing, Rush?
Very good. Very good. Thanks.
Been listening to you since August 1st, 1988, and listened through all your trials and stuff. And I just got to let you know, Wednesday of last week, I had cochlear implant surgery.
You did?
Yes. My right ear had total hearing loss. It was sudden. Went to bed one night. It was fine. Got up the next morning. It was gone. And I just wanted to let you know just how much you inspired my decision to have this implant, your impact goes far beyond the political out here in the fruited plains. And I just want to let you know that you're an inspiration. And I'm, so far I'm glad I've had it. And I'm doing well. But you just had to know that just how much of an impact you have other than the political.
Cannot thank you enough. That's very inspirational to hear. What you can still hear in your left ear a little?
Yeah, I've got about 50% hearing in my left ear.
Now, can you hang on to the break here?
Absolutely.
Because we got to take it here. We're back here in just a second. Don't go away. Now back to Bud in Stowe, Ohio. It's interesting that they authorized implant surgery when you still had 60% hearing on your left side. Back when I got mine, if I wasn't able, I don't think my memory is that you had to have under 10% hearing loss in both ears before you could be approved by the FDA for the surgery. That's probably changed since then.
Oh, yeah, that's changed. And we're going with the Baja system, which is a bone-anchored hearing aid. It uses bone conduction. My implant, the mount stud, is actually about an inch behind my right ear, and it's screwed right into the skull. And after 3 months or so of healing, then the transducer will just clip onto that, and it's removable. It'll clip onto that, and the vibrations go down to the cochlear nerve and all that stuff. So it's a new system. I guess Cochlear, I've been in touch with Cochlear through the whole process. It's about 1.5 years old.
Well, how are you doing on speech comprehension on that side?
Well, right now, I can't hear anything on the right ear. Once the transducer, they have this, Rush, they have this.
Oh, wait, you mean that they haven't activated it yet? That's what you're telling me.
No. It's going to take about 2.5, 3 months for the bone to heal around the actual mounting.
Okay. See, mine was turned on 30 days, and it was. I don't have the bone transducer element.
Cochlear, right?
I'm right into the cochlear nerve. They scoop out the entire inner ear. And replace it with a pillow with the man-made electrodes that connects to the nerve. And then it's a crapshoot.
Right.
As to how well it works. Everybody's different. There's so many factors. The longer you're deaf before you get it done, the less success you'll have statistically.
Right. Well, the prime thing on this one was I still had one good nerve, and that the bone conduction on the right side will actually activate the left side nerve. So...
How long did this surgery take?
About 45 minutes.
45 minutes?
Yeah. They literally just made a 1-inch incision, dissected down to the skull, cleaned everything up, and then they literally just screwed this thing into the skull. It looks like a T15 stud.
Yeah.
And a snap. And we're looking at the one of the transducers, the Baja 5, is actually Bluetooth compatible. So
yeah, that's new. I have to wear a necklace around my neck if I want to use that Bluetooth stuff, which I don't do. I mean, but mine's an antique. Mine's an antique compared to yours.
Well, you were one of the first that I've ever heard of, and because of your success and your don't give up attitude, and you didn't let that stop you from your love of what you do. That's part of the inspiration that helped me decide to go ahead and do this.
Well, good for you. I appreciate you saying that.
And it's true. You have a far greater impact than beyond a political.
Well, let me tell you, the loss, hearing loss today doesn't mean what it used to mean. But not everybody is how to phrase it. Not everybody is a candidate for implant surgery. There have to be some circumstances met. Back in my day, you had to have really
we had a checklist that we had to go down.
Right.
Before, yeah.
Well, I'm glad it worked. I'm sure it's going to be successful. If you've got 60% hearing on your left side, that's a great buffer. But Bud, I appreciate the call. I really do, and best of luck with it. Here's something I tell everybody, Bud. And you probably already have learned this just in the course of living your life. I have found that the disability of hearing loss is the only disability in the world the victim is blamed for having it. For example, if somebody can't see, you would never say to them, just look harder. I know you can see. You're fake. Just look harder. Or if somebody's in a wheelchair and can't walk, you will not say, come on, just get up and walk. Just try. But when you have hearing loss,
you're absolutely
people
right, Rush.
think you can hear and are just not trying or just not paying attention. I still have Bud, I still have people whisper to me on the golf course thinking that I can hear them. And they know I'm deaf. I mean, they know that the hearing is a strange disability for people, because the one thing you can pretend to be blind, you can close your eyes. And you can pretend to not be able to walk, but you can't, no matter what you do. Folks, you cannot become totally deaf. You can't plug your ears up. You can't put headphones. There's nothing you can do that equates total deafness. And as such, you think everybody, there's no such thing. You can hear something. I know you can. And because of the vagaries of the input, some things I do hear that I'm surprised I hear. Acoustics, it's amazing. But just be patient with people out there, bud. Just be patient. Because they will lose patience with you, even though they know you can't hear. Now, I appreciate the call. We have a soundbite here. This Trump is winning story, but time is rapidly vanishing. But this soundbite, Trump had a press conference with the Prime Minister of Greece. His name is Alexis Tsipras. It's a joint presser. And John Roberts, the White House co-respondent for Fox News, said, Mr. Prime Minister, with respect to the president, in March of 2016, you said that the potential of a Donald Trump presidency, quote, I hope we will not face this evil. And I'm wondering if after spending time with the president, you have changed your mind if you are the same mind. Now, that's the question, but the answer here is Trump, not the prime minister. So, here's what Trump says is the important thing.
A number of countries were a little bit nervous at the beginning, and I have very good relationships with the leaders of virtually every country I've dealt with. But the reason they were concerned was because I will not allow our country, the United States of America, to be taken advantage of by so many other countries all over the world. If you look at our trade deficits, massive trade deficits with virtually every country. You look at our jobs moving out to certain countries, and the companies are leaving and they're firing the people, and the product is made elsewhere and then it's sold back into the United States. I'm not going to be allowing that. So I can understand how certain countries and the leaders of certain countries may feel. But we're just not going to allow the United States to be taken advantage of.
Hey, there you have it again in a nutshell. So you have McCain's worldview that we created the world that we wanted, and we've been leading that world for 75 years, and our responsibility to keep doing that. And Trump is trying to abrogate that. McCain is so out of touch on this. What Trump is pointing out is we have been taken advantage of for 40 years, however long we've been blamed for all the evils in the world and the lack of prosperity and so forth. And all Trump is saying is those days are over. And we're going to put America back into that leadership position that McCain so values, but doesn't realize we've lost. And you know what? A lot of other swamp dwellers don't realize we've lost it because they're content with the idea that America is to blame and that America needs to be cut down in size for whatever reasons. So this all come together pretty well today. We'll take a break and be back after this. By the way, folks, I need to tell you, I'm not going to be here tomorrow. I have another funeral/memorial to attend out on the left coast. But I'll be back here on Thursday. Frank in Orlando, Florida. Hey, what's happening? What's up?
Rush, thank you for everything you've done and continue to do for the country, sir.
Well, Priest, thank you very much, sir.
You had a guy, you were talking about tax cuts earlier and the influx of capital that would result. And some guy that obviously didn't know anything about economics called in and said, well, that'll cause inflation. Well, excuse me, but, you know, I'm no Thomas Sowell, but I do have a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. I took a lot of economics in college. And what causes inflation is when the government prints money in order to pay their bills, because that's basically creating money out of thin air, see? But when the private sector injects money into the system, that's money that already exists and absolutely will not cause inflation.
No, in fact, you might say that would actually be a stimulus.
Thank you.
That's a great point. You know, I didn't think of that. You're right. This is money already earned by American companies. They're holding it overseas. And they're not repatriating it because the tax rate's so high. It makes no business sense to do it. So the tax reform plan lowers the corporate tax rate and has a one-time special rate for repatriation. Let's say that's $2 trillion total. $1 trillion. Pick a number. That money comes back. It's not going to cause inflation because it's money that theoretically is already backed by the financial system. It's not printed, nor is it borrowed from somewhere else by the government. when they print it or borrow it, they take it out of the existing economy as it is and then put it back in. There's no stimulus whatsoever. That's a good point. Your economic studies have been validated today as worthwhile. Okay, reminder, Mark Stein will be here tomorrow. Yeah, I have to travel tomorrow, another funeral and a memorial, and then back here on Thursday. So just one day. Thanks in advance to Mr. Stein. Maybe he's found some Russians to go with a Russian collusion story. He'll announce that if he has. See you Thursday, folks.